Part 2, Game 12, French Defense, New York, 1918. White, J.R. Capablanca, Black, O. Chajez. E4, E6, D4, D5, Knight C3, Knight F6, Bishop D3. Not the most favored move, but a perfectly natural developing one, and consequently, it cannot be bad. D takes E4. C5 is generally played in this case instead of the text move. Knight takes E4, Knight B, D7, Knight takes F6 check, Knight takes F6, Knight F3, Bishop E7, Queen E2. This is played to prevent B7 to B6, followed by Bishop B7, which is the general form of development for Black in this variation. If Black now plays B6, then Bishop B5 check, Bishop D7, Knight E5, and White obtains a considerable advantage in position. Castles, Bishop G5, H6. Of course, Black could not play B6 because of Bishop takes F6, followed by Bishop takes F6, Queen E4. Bishop takes F6, Bishop takes F6, Queen E4, G6. This weakens Black's king side. Rook E8 was the right move. H4, E5. This is merely giving up a pawn in order to come out quickly with his queen's bishop. But as he does not obtain any compensation for his pawn, the move is bad. He should have played Queen D5 and tried to fight the game out that way. It might have continued thus: Queen F4, Bishop G7, Queen takes C7, Bishop takes D4, Knight takes D4, Queen takes D4, Queenside castle, with considerable advantage of position for White. The text move might be considered a mild form of suicide. D takes E5, Bishop F5, Queen F4, Bishop takes D3, Queenside castle, Bishop G7, Rook takes D3, Queen E7, Queen C4, in order to keep the Black Queen from coming into the game. Rook A, D8, Rook H, D1. A better plan would have been to play Rook E1, threatening E5 to E6. Rook takes D3, Rook takes D3, Rook E8, C3, C6. Of course, if Bishop takes E5, then Knight takes E5, Queen takes E5, Rook E3. Black with a pawn minus fights very hard. Rook E3. The pawn had now to be defended after Black's last move, because after Bishop takes E5, Knight takes E5, Queen takes E5, Rook E3, Black can now play Queen B8, defending the rook. C5, King C2, B6, A4. White's plan now is to fix the queen side in order to be able to maneuver freely on the other side, where he has the advantage of material. Queen D7, Rook D3, Queen C8, Queen E4, Queen e6, rook d5, king f8, c4, king g8. Black sees that he now stands in his best defensive position, and therefore waits for white to show how he intends to break through. He notices, of course, that the white knight is in the way of the f-pawn, which cannot advance to f4 to defend, or support rather, the pawn at e5. b3, king f8, king d3, king g8, rook d6, queen c8, rook d5, queen e6, g4, king f8, queen f4, king g8, queen e4, king f8. Black persists in waiting for developments. He sees that if h5, then g takes h5, g takes h5, the queen goes to h3, and white will have to face serious difficulties. In this situation, white decides that the only course is to bring his king to g3, so as to defend the squares h3 and g4, where the black queen might otherwise become a source of annoyance. King e2, king g8, king f1, king f8, king g2, king g8, king g3, king f8. Now that he has completed his march with the king, white is ready to advance. h5, g takes h5. g5 would be answered by queen f5 with a winning game. G takes h5, queen e7. Against king g8, white would play queen g4, practically forcing the exchange of queens, after which white would have little trouble in winning the ending, since black's bishop could not do much damage in the resulting position. Queen f5, king g8. Black overlooks the force of rook d7. His best defense was rook d8, against which white could either advance the king or play knight h4, threatening knight g6 check. Rook d7, bishop takes e5 check. This loses a piece, but black's position was altogether hopeless. King g4, queen f6, knight takes e5, queen g7 check, king f4, resigns. The interest of this game centers mainly on the opening and on the march of the white king during the final stage of the game. It is an instance of the king becoming a fighting piece, even while the queens are still on the board.